This is a podcast with Michael and Daniel Davies from Prestige Optical and Chris Airy from Compendium Solutions. Welcome to our show, Leaders with Suspicions. I hope you enjoy.
Hello, Mike, Dan, great to meet you.
Good afternoon, Chris. How are you keeping? Hope you're keeping well.
All good. So why don't you introduce yourselves and why two of you are on this call, which is the first for this podcast series, and tell us about your day. How are you getting on?
Definitely. After a busy morning of operations, my name's Mike. I'm the founder of a company called Prestige Optical. What we do is we install fibre infrastructure on behalf of leading ISPs in the UK. This morning's definitely been a busy one with operations. We seem to have a bit more problems this morning than we used to, but it's all part of the fun. I'm from a small town called Harpenden, that is just north of London, if you know the area near St Albans. And I have been running the company for around 4 years now. After taking redundancy actually from a company that I was working for 15 years. And I'm sure we'll get into that shortly.
Morning, Chris. Morning, listeners. So I'm Dan, so I'm the Managing Director for Prestige Optical. Mike and I are also brothers. I'm connecting with you today from Harpenden as well. Reasons for myself to start the business with Mike. We've always been in telecoms. Our father was in telecoms as well, at one of the well-known and largest telecoms company in the UK. So naturally, we were brought into a telecoms world straight from an early age, looking at copper and the old dial-up connections. You know, if you remember the old doo-doo-doo sounds of your Wi-Fi starting up, that was definitely a familiar sound in our household. Always been interested in change management, operations, and understanding how business works. So naturally, myself and Mike thought it would be great to start up our own fibre infrastructure business.
Okay, and fibre infrastructure, could you just explain where that sits in the whole stack of OpenReach and everyone else in the telco role?
Yeah, definitely. So, what by fibre infrastructure we mean installing fibre optic cables and connecting them so that homes and businesses and communities can basically benefit from super fast broadband. In the UK, there was an ambition to have full fibre rolled out to 85% of the UK by the late 2020s. And then obviously with the ambition to get everyone 100% with full fibre connections. For listeners at home, what that actually means is making sure that you've got faster services within your home and also have an infrastructure that you can have more complex devices on. As innovation comes in and you get 3D TVs and appliances that basically rely on that fibre infrastructure, you need to make sure that it's fit for purpose and fast enough so that it can support those devices. So that's what we mean by fibre infrastructure. We don't actually own that network. We have a business that contracts resource to install that. So we've got the expertise to deliver infrastructure within the UK, whether that be OpenReach or any other what we call alternative network in the UK as well. Dan, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, so just to expand slightly on it. So what OpenReach did is they released something called physical infrastructure access, or everything in the fiber world has an acronym. So it's called PIA. So where you see your holes and your poles, when you're walking along the pavement and you see BT written on one of those little lids, underneath that you have a connection of ducts which go from one to the other all throughout the UK. What we do is we put fiber optic cable through that network so that you have an interconnection of fiber optic cable, or back in the day copper cable, connecting all of the homes throughout not just the UK but throughout the world as well. And that's essentially how internet works: one computer speaking to another through a series of cables.
Okay, so let's go back to you two then. So you were in the industry, and then one day you went, let's do this? What tell me about that moment.
Yeah,
Um,
that's an interesting one on kind of how we started. So Mike touched on it kind of just a moment ago, but essentially, so Mike was in a partner management role for one of the big telecoms companies. Um, he was offered that redundancy and took it. And at the time, I was also in a management role, in charge of a number of people across the OpenReach network who were installing copper cable at the time. Now, what Mike did is he took that redundancy and he was floating around on a lilo in Egypt at the time. And one of his contracting companies gave him a call and said, "Hey, look, we're looking for contractors to support us in our network." And Mike kind of said, "Look, I'm I'm now kind of out of that role slightly, so sorry I can't help you out." And then he had a light bulb moment and said, "Hang on a minute, I've been looking to think about what I'm doing as my next step. I'll do it myself." And he gave me a call up and said, "Dan, I've had a really stupid idea. What do you think about this?" And I said, "I don't think it's stupid at all. Let's go for it." And that was essentially kind of the first contract there to go and subcontract for one of Mike's um, contracting partners at the time. And yeah, we just kind of grew from there. We've got an elder brother as well who put some investment into the business and said, "Here you go, guys. If you really back this idea, here's a little bit of a kickstart. I trust your judgment on fiber optics." Which Mike and I looked at each other and went, "Right, we better not mess this one up." And yeah, we thankfully managed to scramble together enough people, train up enough people, get vans, get what's called splicers, which is effectively a piece of equipment that connects two fiber optic cables together, and away we went, and we were thrown right in at the deep end, and thankfully swam.
it's
Okay. And just going back then in terms of, you're talking about your family has some telco legacy, yeah? Who else were your mentors and influences? And I guess also apart from a business point of view as well, in terms of giving you that confidence to set up a business.
yeah, definitely. I think I never was like the entrepreneurial one of the family. Obviously, this was actually the first business that I ever tried to start, and thankfully it's gone relatively well. Um, and Dan has always been very entrepreneurial, so that's why I was the first person. He was the first person I called when I had this idea, because I knew that he would have an open-mindedness to be able to say, "Yeah, I think you should run with it," or "No, I think it's a very silly idea." So essentially, the reason I started that and looked for entrepreneurship was actually because I knew that Dan had had experience in this in the past of some of the businesses that he set up. So I think definitely from an influencer perspective, his guidance there. But if I was to look at where I was within fiber infrastructure, it was actually what people didn't do that influenced me most. So
Okay.
in my role as partner manager, I looked after big incumbents, okay, on behalf of OpenReach. So I needed to ensure that they delivered in different parts of the UK because it was set up in terms of regionalisation. And I just felt that they didn't give the service that I expected as someone who is owning the contracts. Um, and I felt it could be done better, which is the whole reason I delved into going into this. I wanted to make sure that service was better, quality was better. I thought the whole thing could be uplifted, and I didn't think that it was just down to these big corporations that could go and do this. So that's the whole reason I set the company up.
Brilliant. And you talked about regionalisation there. I mean, I know from some of the work I've done that there seems to be quite a difference between rural broadband and connectivity and urban broadband and connectivity. Do you want to talk about what difference that kind of stuff makes to your business and the complexities?
It's a minefield. It's when you talk about rural build, there is a massive complexity in terms of the routes that you take. So where you've got very dense areas, it is often easier to serve and feed the homes and businesses around it because you've got lots of infrastructure in the ground. When you go to more rural parts, you're then talking about long, long routes across farms and infrastructure that has been in there for years and years and years. So what happens in those respects is it becomes a lot more expensive and it becomes a lot more complex to get the infrastructure to where you need it to go. Dan, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so the rural build is much more expensive from an investor point of view and from a client point of view. So to elaborate on what Mike said there, where we mentioned earlier, where you have two chambers underground that connect to one another, when you get rural build, because they have much less population within that rural build. Back when they had copper network, you used to get buried cable. So you used to get the copper, which then had sheathing around it, so they would bury it straight underground without having a duct which connects to where you need it to go. So now when they're upgrading into a modern infrastructure, where on an urban environment you can hit, we do what's called rod and roping. So you stick a rod through the duct, put a bit of rope on, pull it back, and then pull your cable through with that bit of rope. When you get it where there isn't a duct there, there's only one option, and it's to dig up the pavement. So you get a number of challenges that come with that. One being you can't get any rod or rope through in the first place, so you have to dig it up. There's challenge one, but challenge two is a lot of residents aren't educated on what is needed to happen to upgrade into a full fibre network. So naturally, if you imagine somebody digging up your garden or the road outside your house, a lot of people do get quite frustrated with their pavement being dug up, the traffic lights that are in the road causing disruption to getting from A to B. If it's outside a school, that it disrupts the school run and it just ruins the flow of that whole community. So there are certainly challenges that come with it, but in terms of rural versus urban build, the cost and the complexity with a rural build is much higher, to the extent where the government actually released a scheme where they were looking to pay more to companies to focus on rural build over urban build to upgrade their network.
And there's some specialist businesses in that space as well, yeah. So I guess I was interested in terms of where you're focusing. That you have the whole UK to go for, and it's a big market. So what have you done in terms of working out your go-to-market positioning and the economics you're looking after? Take me through how you decided where to focus your business and why.
I think when we first started, it was a case of taking what we could get. If I'm really honest, we didn't have the luxury of being able to pick and choose the type of works and where we were going. You have different stages of where you can enter the market, and we're in a position where we had to work into a contractor and then into an ISP in order to start the business as such. So I knew that it was always a longer term plan to work directly into some of the leading ISPs, but I had to phase that approach. So when we first started, it was just a case of looking at homes and which could be fed for full fibre. So we used to install all of it wasn't actually us, but the company that we used to work for used to install all of the infrastructure that surrounded the homes, and then we would then be in charge of connecting the homes to the endpoint. And then we broke out after about a year and a half into them building our own network infrastructure and then going on to be able to work directly for ISPs after about year two. So it's definitely a phased approach, but we then started to look at the more rural builds because we knew that that's where the demand was, but not rural enough for it to be so difficult to put in, if that makes sense. So you're looking at the likes of Herts, Beds and Bucks, but not the big cities where it was a lot busier. So it kind of gave us an opportunity to dip our toe into the market and at a scale that we knew was achievable, because the last thing we wanted to do was go after big cities and towns and then just not be able to deliver on the back of it, either through resource or experience difficulties. So it's definitely a phased approach into market, but one that I knew we had to make in order to get to where we are today.
So sounds like a classic startup story, right? Opportunity lands and you go for it. Then it's about getting any work you can to get some revenue in a case study. Okay.
It's the same.
So go on, be honest. When did this plan appear?
This plan appeared in, I'd say, I think it was November 2021, and by February we had teams on the ground. So there was about 4 months planning. There wasn't a huge amount of thought that went into it, if I'm really honest, and it was more of an opportunistic moment, and just a kind of we're going to go for it approach, as opposed to years of planning, which I know obviously is the other route in. So we saw the opportunity. We then took it with both hands, got secured some investment within the case of about 4 months, and then it was a case of starting. And I'd be lying if I said we went into it knowing what we were going into as well, because you have different products within fibre infrastructure, and where I was managing within Openreach was definitely a different area to where I was when I was starting the build programs for fibre to the premises.
Okay. You now talk about owning your own network. What additional responsibilities does that give you? How has that made your business more complicated?
I think the additional responsibilities, so none of the network we actually own. So it's all owned by your lead ISPs. Now, I did actually start a company which owned its own network infrastructure as well. But what it turns out is very, very expensive. So although you own all the fiber infrastructure is very expensive. The labor to install it is very expensive. The components are very expensive. It's all of those, and then at the end of it all, you need to have a paying customer to get a return on investment. And one thing that you're seeing in the UK at the moment is many of the alternative networks that are out there at the moment are either being merged or acquired by bigger companies because it's very expensive to own and maintain your own network infrastructure. I learned that very, very quickly because I tried it at a very small scale, and it just didn't work. So that's when we went into the contractor model.
Okay.
The other big problem with owning your own infrastructure is competition. You get your big players, your BT/Openreach, and everybody that latches onto their infrastructure. As Mike mentioned earlier, these alt nets or alternative networks that operate as well. So when you have a smaller company trying to get in on that, it's very, very difficult then to you can get the equipment in the ground absolutely fine, but what's difficult, Mike mentions ISP as well, which is internet service provider, right? So that's the likes of your PlusNets, your Skies, and anybody else that you could buy broadband from if you just went on one of these comparison network sites. So for us, when we're putting infrastructure in the ground that has the capability to get an ISP, an internet service provider, on the end of it, we then need to get the relationships with them as option number two, or option number one would be, do we just make our own broadband company, our own ISP off the back of it, which comes with a lot of other problems altogether. So whilst the idea of owning your own infrastructure sounds fantastic, there's only one real reason for a small scale business to do that, and that's to have a quick exit plan off the back of it, sell that into one of the bigger companies.
Okay. So let's move on a bit then. So as a scaling business, people are obviously quite important, and you've got to get, I guess, crews and staff that you can trust. Yeah. So how's that been for you? In the UK, it's got quite a lot of political commentary about workforce quality, immigration, all the rest of it. So what's your experience been of scaling your business?
Tough,
The
very,
people that we
very
have,
tough. Go on, Mike, do
the
you want to
people
say
that we have are probably that's the most difficult part of what we do. Having people that are knowledgeable, having people that work hard, having people with the right expertise, and then also attracting them to your company. one of the biggest difficulties about starting up is trying to get people to buy into your vision when you've got no history or credibility, which has to be built over time. So it was probably the most difficult bit of the startup process, and it continues to be the most difficult bit because as you develop people, they also want progression, and you end up either and you know, if they get offered more money elsewhere, you know, they'll be looking to leave. So we really have to operate a business that keeps them within our company, and that's done through offering them progression through our company and giving them the right treatment. So making sure that they know that they're cared for. One of the main things that attracts people to our company is we're not massive like the likes of Telent, OCU, and Telent and Morrison's, which are kind of the big players in the market. We're small enough for them to matter, and for them to really make a difference and feel like they're making a difference to us. So we treat them well enough so that they stay, and hopefully, you know, we've got to be competitive in our pricing structure as well.
So what does that look like in terms of people management? Is it, I mean, you know, there's many facets of it. I mean, pay is one part, but you've also got training and development, culture. You've talked about progression. Yeah. What actually makes a difference in your view?
I think the day-to-day communication is massive. Making sure that they understand that we are listening to their problems. Engagement, making sure that they have an input in their daily activities. Like you say, it's not all about money. It's about them feeling like their input is valued. And it isn't just making them, for us, just making them feel like it is. It actually is. They're the experts on the ground. They know exactly what they're doing. And I would argue that the people that we've got are some of the best in the industry. And making sure that they have an input on how they go about their working processes, and us listening, making changes on the back of their feedback, really makes a difference. And of course, treating them with respect. I think a lot of the time within our industry, there is you know, you say we do kind of a methodology, because the back office teams, you know, obviously see the raw builds, but it's so important to get that feedback and let them have an input on the activities that they complete and ultimately that they're experts in.
So you operate mainly in an employed model, or do you have or subcontract model?
So we do operate an employed model. We would have a split of around 60% a self-employed model and a 40% direct labour model.
Okay.
So,
And you see any of that changing with the government's new plans to make sort of self-employment and 0 hours and all of that a bit more problematic?
Good question.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely Dan's remit.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Something which is a key focus for us right now, and we are starting to transition into a more direct labor based model without having a contractor based model. So rather than kind of a load of self-employed individuals working with you, we can do it one of two ways, where they are then entirely their own companies, I suppose, which will subcontract into us, which has its benefits on one hand, or operate on a direct labor PAYE model, which we're much more focused on. So I can see this moving much more towards a 80-90% PAYE direct labor model rather than a subcontracted model. But it's literally flavor of the last 6 months for us and how we can still make it effective within our business. But then the questions that we have are, if you don't have PAYE staff or direct labor staff, what are the best ways to drive positive thinking, to drive the right outputs, to drive efficiencies? How do we do that within our business? You know, as Mike alluded to there, this isn't solely about a business making profit, profit, profit. We created this business so that we could give back to people, so that we could give back to not just our engineering staff and our management staff, but so that we can give back to the community and give back to other organizations. So that's a mindset Mike and I haven't lost as we've started this business. We've made sure that we've stuck to those morals on why we created this business in the first place. But yeah, to the initial point, PAYE model is much preferred, and I think within the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to see a big shift in that percentages that Mike just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I asked you the question, not knowing the answer. I think everybody's wrestling about what is all this new employment registration legislation trying to do? What impacts is it going to have? Is it going to reduce flexibility? Because effectively, if everyone goes PAYE, it's on a risk on your cost base, really, in terms of work. Which is
Definitely.
Yeah, but actually also for the people who quite enjoy being self-employed and flexible, it removes some of that choice for them. So it's interesting to see how it all falls out. So again, let's move on to running the business. So what does a day in the life of Mike and Dan look like? Yeah, what do you do in a typical day? What metrics and KPIs do you track? Just chaos.
I shout at Mike.
Sorry.
I shout at Mike and make sure he's doing his job. That's effectively my job. But operationally, I think Mike's probably well set to kind of go through that
Yeah.
and what he does.
No 2 days are the same, to be honest. I have a daily call with my operational managers to go through the KPIs, both in terms of productivity and finance. But a lot of my day is solving problems. They're not just the small problems either; they are the big problems that come on my desk. But yeah, I think my morning starts with the start of day call to see what was delivered yesterday, and to check that we're on track essentially with the week. We're then going to looking at our resources and where they're going to be placed for the coming days ahead. We've got clients that need to be looked after and communicated with, and having that touch base call to go through where we were yesterday and what we're doing for the next few days. It's really important in solidifying our resource structure so that it fits in line with the delivery expectations of all of our clients. So those calls are super important. I'll then go on to meeting my health and safety teams or back office teams. Although we do have a lot of resource delivering our network infrastructure, I also have got teams in the back office that gather all the data, evidence, keep our teams safe. So making sure that we've got a strategy that aligns with that as well is really, really important. And at the moment, we're going through some industry-wide qualifications, ISO accreditations, which we're getting audited for. So a lot of my time spent at the moment is ensuring that all of our ducks are in a row to ensure that we're compliant with those ISO regulations, because we want to make sure that we retain those. And then, like I say, it'll be a case after that of problem solving some of the issues of the day, which are normally van related or fleet related, or in respect to clients not getting what they've asked for, or some sort of problem to fix, which always drops in my inbox.
Okay, and what tools and systems do you have in your business, to tell you what's going on or improve service or give you the KPIs? What do you have?
Absolutely. So we've obviously got systems that ensure that our people have everything that they need. So we do use a system called Breathe HR, which is our people system. On there, I've got all of our engineers, training they require, and that keeps me straight in terms of giving me actions day to day for anything that we've missed. So by inputting the training tools and equipment they have, the vans and MOTs and things that they've got, what ends up happening is for my managers, they'll drop in notifications to ensure that they know what's upcoming, and that enables them to essentially not miss anything. But then in terms of the KPIs on delivery, we use it honestly. There's no big system that we it's Excel generated. So we'll use that to track and trace our delivery on a day-to-day basis, and then we will cross-reference that with what comes out in the reporting.
When do you think that's going to need to change? Are you forever going to run the business on Excel?
Of course not. I think if I'm being honest, there isn't something out there right now that enables, or there may be, we just haven't explored it. We haven't yet found a system that can accurately give us everything that we need. So I think one of our 6 to 12 months plans is probably going to be to find a system that will generate more accuracy, greater efficiency in the reporting that we get. I haven't yet found it.
It's a good point though, that Chris, because I think the question that we asked ourselves, and the question that any founder or leader needs to ask themselves is, what are you hoping to achieve with a system? And it's essentially, does said system give you the outputs that you need to run your business? So from a finance level, for example, we use Xero. From an operations level, we use things like Monday.com to do different parts of our business. But essentially what we did was we went on Fibre.com, which is effectively freelancers who I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but effectively freelancers who do stuff. So you can get different, very, very clever people, much, much more clever than Mike and I, to do creative things. And in our case was with Excel. So where you might see kind of two guys that definitely know a lot about Fibre, definitely don't know a lot about Excel. What was very important is finding the right place to go to be able to find somebody that can make an Excel environment very, very effective. So although on the face of it, when you think of Excel, you might just see a load of cells that where you just got down some numbers and some writing. It's not quite like that. It is an all singing, all dancing version because we've hired the right people to be able to do those operations for us.
I actually think there's not a lot wrong with Excel for many use cases. Where I've seen it get challenging with my tech background is when your management becomes more distributed as your business scales. Yeah. So if effectively you're using Excel as a hoover to get all of the data in for you two, that's kind of okay because you're using that data. But when you want to get that data down to lower levels of management as you grow, to effectively empower them, you then end up with shared spreadsheets and it gets more and more tricky and difficult and you understand how it works and nobody else does. So it has a real purpose at a stage in life of a business, in my view. And actually it's a good tool because you're still iterating how you want to run your operation. It's just when you get bigger, as I hope you're planning to do, it's sometimes gets more difficult to have multiple managers working on the same spreadsheet. I don't know, Microsoft will probably phone me up now and go, it's not a problem, you just stick it in the cloud and it'll all be fine. Yeah. But
I think as well, so I did invest in creating a platform, an app to basically run the operations that we do on Excel onto a managed platform. What actually ended up happening though is through client changes, strategy changes, the goalposts were always moving on what we were measuring. The goalposts were always moving on the type of work that we did. So I was always in a position where I needed to ensure that that was fully updated in line with whatever types of works that we were doing. And it just became very difficult to manage a platform, and Excel, honestly, it was the answer because it was much more adaptable, and I didn't need a whole website developer to be paying for that's going to be constantly changing. I was able to be able to do a lot of it myself, which is important, especially in the earlier years where weren't making as much money.
So, do you have operational challenges now? What are they?
Definitely. We face operational challenges every single day. The main ones are the expensive ones. People, vans, tools and equipment. And to be honest, at the moment, it will be where next is going to be our operational challenge. And what do we go into to solidify our future, essentially. With full fibre at the moment, I'll just touch on this point. With full fibre at the moment, there is definitely more and more homes getting connected. Obviously, we hope to continue that, maintain network infrastructure, but there is going to be a lesser need for engineers to be installing fibre at the amount or rate that we have now. You will see in the industry there's been quite a lot of redundancies across the park, whether that be from a consolidation perspective with the ISPs, or they've stopped building to connect more homes, for example. So the industry has kind of led a refined resource, and they've kind of led the way in terms of we've seen a big reduction in the amount of people that have been required to install the network infrastructure. Luckily, we're one of the incumbents that have maintained contracts and won more actually. But essentially, it kind of put us in a position where we want to protect our future a little bit more. What that looks like is we'll probably be going into the likes of solar, the likes of energy, because what we have found is we can multi-skill and cross-skill the current engineers that we have, because they're not just fibre engineers. They have the ability to adapt and change. And then the other two, vans constantly going wrong. We're constantly looking for fleets that are more reliable, and that will come through ensuring that we've got robust fleet management processes in play, and then also picking the right vehicles and style that we want to incorporate on vans, whether that be lease hire, owning vehicles outright, renting them. We're just managing through at the moment on what our fleet management style looks like.
Okay, interesting. And you kind of answered part of my next question, but I'd recommend that you watch one of the other podcasts we've done with a Satcom business. Some really interesting stuff there about mobile convergence. And I think, as always in telco, there is always convergence, but whole satellite mobile network and why not broadband all coming together in the future should be quite interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I'll have a look at that.
So moving on then in terms of growth and strategy for the next 12 months and beyond, and you've kind of teased a little bit where you're thinking of heading in terms of leveraging your core asset, which is your installers, yeah? But how did you come up with that? How do you plan for growth? What are you looking to achieve? And particularly going back to the employment piece, there's some risk there to manage as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So
Yeah, pass you to Dan, I was going to say.
cool. No problem. So I think that looking ahead, Mike mentioned there about what our problems are and how we come up with the solutions for that growth strategy. So one problem, for example, was vans. So one of the strategies that we have been looking at and we've now created is we're looking at setting up a car garage, because the cost of running a car garage has been and will be more cost effective than the amount that we're paying out at the moment on vans breaking down. That was one option. Another option that we were looking at was, can we or should we look at a leased van solution, the likes of Enterprise, where we can get a number of vans, and the more vans you get, the cheaper they'll end up becoming, so that we can effectively have a revolving, or I suppose, of vans every couple of years when and if they break down. And that's kind of what we're looking at now in terms of different strategies. Where are the problems and what's the solution to that problem? So with the actual business side of things, we were looking at, as Mike alluded to there, energy and solar and how we can actually go about doing it. One of the biggest learnings, one of the biggest lessons within the business is realizing you can't do it all. And especially, and what I mean by that is not just as a business, but also as individuals. It's a huge learning curve that both Mike and I have had, where you need to be able to rely on other people to do a job better than you. It's exactly why certain job functions exist, right? And so at the moment, it's about understanding what do we want to go into that's relevant within our business and to our business, and who are the right people to do it. We're also looking at different things. We do civils work. So I mentioned earlier about digging up the road when we have ducting and trenching to do. Now, with civils work, you can have a look at things like council-owned projects like pothole repair, different traffic management incentives, and different things that you would see in your everyday life and when you're driving down the road, putting up poles, fixing lampposts, or anything along those things. And that's the type of growth that we're looking at the moment.
Okay, so I think one thing most businesses struggle with is innovation. So when have you tried to do things and it's gone really well? And when have you tried to do things and it's gone really badly? And what did you learn?
Mike, do you want to tackle that one?
So I think the that's a good question. So where it's gone really well. So we have never delved into the a product of access points. So essentially, we knew that we had good skilled engineers. We knew that they knew network infrastructure, but we hadn't actually delved into a new product like access points, where essentially you're able to join different access points within a building and remain connected, whether you be 200 meters from your house in the gym area. And essentially, we need to learn very, very quickly how to install these. So essentially, we did a crash course in AP installation, and we were able to deliver that infrastructure. And it supported us win a lot more in the access point world now that we fully understand it. So that's probably one that's gone very, very well. One that's gone badly. There's
I
definitely
think,
been some.
yeah, I think really, really bad. I mean, we touched on the pretty stuff when we started our conversation, which was around how the business started and how it seemingly all went smoothly. The reality is it didn't. We were operating at a loss for the first year of our business, to the point where, we were very worried about whether we should continue with the business. The reason why we were operating at a loss is because we had to identify quickly. Not every contract is a good contract to have, and that's a really, really important lesson, because although you might have people that are doing a certain job, in one of our businesses was rodding and roping from the house into a central point. We were doing all of that work, but because we'd spent so much money on our tools, equipment, etc., we didn't identify quick enough how to make money as a business. So you had two guys again that half decent at fiber optics, that didn't understand how the mechanics of a business worked, and we were driving money. We were throwing money away to begin with. And I think it's a really important lesson to understand. Not every contract is worth having.
Yeah, that's a very powerful statement and often true, but sometimes you don't know when you get into them. So how do you measure that contract profitability? You have to bring a lot of data together to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good question as well. So it's about, with any contract, you have the preliminary bits before you sign the dotted line, and it's understanding, well, what is the contract? We've in the early days, it's very difficult to be really honest with it. But now that we understand what parts of what we do generate money and what the value of what we do is worth, we're able to set a rate card effectively, so that we're not greedy as a business. So we don't want to, make millions and millions of pounds. It's not the I don't think that's how a business should operate, to be honest. It's about being fair and understanding the service that you give a client is a good service based on a fair value. So what we do now is we will ask the right questions to whoever we're working with, and we have said no to some quite big players, which on the business CV, if you like, we look great to have them on board, but in reality, it's you're having them on board because of their name, and you're not going to make any money as a business. And it's not about making money as a business, but it sure as heck isn't about losing money as a business. So what we do is we will identify the opportunity by having a look at what it is that they are asking for, seeing what the cost of our staff is on that project, as well as our OpEx costs, and then seeing based on on that combined number, what do I need to make to be profitable in a day, and literally splitting it day by day. And if you know what the engineers need to achieve in a day, you can then get your management to drive that productivity from your engineering workforce. So that's kind of very, very briefly how we would go about any new contract.
I think as well, what's important to note is in the early days, genuinely, we had no idea. We didn't have a clue. We had to learn through failing in order to understand what good looked like and what profit looked like. What on the face of it, because you're very ambitious about how much you can do in the early days, and you'd be like, yeah, I could get this many done, or we could get a team working at an efficiency rate of X and pay out Y, but it doesn't transition that way. We purely did it through learning, understanding our product in detail, and then we were able to apply those learnings to new contracts and really understand and get into the detail of what would make money and what wouldn't.
And the activity-based costing piece of that, is that complicated or simple for you guys?
It's complicated. We have a synthetic rate card which we work to. So it's not just a case of put fibre in the ground and you will get X price. Every single stage of network infrastructure will have a cost base against it. In most circumstances, especially for external network infrastructure. So understanding each cost base, the expertise that were required to put in components. Just as an example, you'll have a rate broken down for test rod and rope, cabling, splicing, installation of glands. You could even get to the stage of, with some incumbents, just opening a box would be one of the activities. I think in my last check, there was about 500 different activities that could have contributed in some way to external infrastructure. That's across civils, fibre, splicing, installation of spine cable, across the whole host of it, but in and around 500 different synthetic rates.
Amazing. And I think it's really good that you're on top of that and you understand your numbers these days, right? And
Definitely.
It's probably a bit fearful in those early days when you didn't know what you didn't know, and how much you were going to do.
I just think it's important to be real about where we were. Like we were experts in what we did, but not experts in business. And you don't have to be. You can still try. You can still be successful, even when you're delving into the unknown.
Yeah. I think in part that depends on, do you have investment backer, and also how much risk you take on in the early days, and do you understand that, how deep that pain curve is. So I think you guys approached it with some positive thinking there to make sure you had a bit of backing, and also you weren't completely overcommitting. Yeah, so very good. So what excites you about the future of the industry? You sort of talked about there's going to be some changes with, the mass rollout of fibre slowing down a little bit, and you're looking to diversify. But back into telco, what's exciting about telco? What's going to change over the next few years, do you think?
Dan, I'll let you start.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got an industry here which has gone from the cliche paradigm shift, right? But you've gone from investors throwing loads and loads of money into fiber optics, that investment slowing down due to a change in interest rates. when that investment's flowed down, it's meant that the infrastructure providers haven't been able to put more fiber optics in the ground, which has led to that reduction in contractors similar to ourselves, as Mike kind of alluded to earlier. So right now, the excitement in the industry is around who's going to be kind of left once you get a big consolidation of different providers, and how do we position ourselves to be one of the incumbents that are working on behalf of those providers that are left. So for us, it's a really, really exciting industry at the moment. I mean, it's on one hand. On the other hand, you've got that uncertainty that's going on. So it's a really, really strange question to answer at the moment, because you go, yeah, there's the fiber industry is exciting in the fact that not everybody has full fiber network. The pace of technology is absolutely rapid. You need to have some sort of connectivity which is running the technology which is accelerating at pace. So how do we position ourselves to be in a in that running to be able to stick fiber in the ground? And what's the new technology that's coming out that we can get ahead of? So we're constantly looking at different articles and things to see how we can get ahead of the curve. I think it's exciting with the other side of the business as well, on the EV, electric vehicles. I mean, it goes in and out of whether it's a hot topic or not, and you get different people saying, "Oh, it's more energy to get the stuff out of the mines and whatever else." You get loads of different opinions on EV, so it's quite exciting for the moment just to be watching that from a distance as well. But sustainable energy, I think, is something that we can focus on, and I do think that that is going to be an area which is currently not fully exhausted, and I think that's going to be somewhere where we're gonna put our eggs.
It sounds like you're planning your future on remaining a quality provider. Yeah, so the clients want to work with you, because that's in the end the only differentiator, and additionally diversification. Is that fair?
I think that's more than fair. From what Mike said earlier, I think it's really important for us not to suffer from diseconomies of scale. We can't get so big that we're unable to provide a lovely service for the customer. So we need to make sure that we understand where is our sweet spot. We don't want to take on every single contract, otherwise we are going to end up failing. We've got to be able to understand how big can we get to still ensure that we are giving a fantastic service at all times, and how do we remain small enough to ensure that all of our staff are feeling cared for, are feeling loved, and actually hear from the guys that run the business. For us, that's really, really important to ensure our people feel valued. Really, really important. Once you lose that, you lose your business.
So I think you've given lots of great insight in this podcast in terms of things that people should think about, understanding their costs, being clear about the risks they're taking on, choosing good clients, as well as providing a good service. But, talking to any other three sets of brothers out there, who are earlier in their journey, what lessons would you tell them?
Yeah, right. It's really, really important to try to find the split between business and personal. There have been times where in the early days, that's one of the biggest learning curves on a personal level for us as three brothers of different ages. Naturally, your older brother will always want to be, or sister, if you've got three siblings, who naturally the elders are wanting to drive their mindset forward. It's really, really important to try to split the two. The amount of Mother's Days that we've had singing or birthdays, singing happy birthday through gritted teeth is it's not comfortable for anyone. So you've got to learn to split the two and know what you do within the business and separate each function of the business individually. You can't both do finance, and you can't both do operations, and you can't both do any other part of the business. have your known areas and your strengths, play to them, develop your weaknesses would be my advice.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a case of sticking to what you know. Daniel is definitely better at finance than I am. I'm definitely better, if you don't mind me saying, at operations than Daniel. We stick to
Oh
what
no,
we
you're not.
know. We stick to what we know and make sure that we play to our strengths. I think that doesn't just go for whether you're siblings or not. I think to any business, play to your strengths and if not, hire people that are potentially better than you in the roles that you're doing. That's what we did, and we've seen great success on the back of it. So it was something that we'll continue to do.
Well, thank you. That's been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed that. Many dynamics here of the business, a changing industry, the family dynamic. So if anyone wants to use your business, and how would they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. We are on websites, so www.prestigeoptical.co.uk. You can get in touch with us by email, info@prestigeoptical.co.uk, and we're across all social media channels as well. So there's plenty of availability to get in touch. Yeah, all with Prestige Optical Limited.